Welcome back. In this video we're going to take our already centered piece of clay and we're going to pull it into a cylinder. So we're going to go over the skills of pulling cylinders. Again, before you get started, you're going to need your sponge, your undercut tool, your rib tool, your pin tool, and your wire tool for doing the different things you'll need to do. And you'll need your bucket of water, of course, and your clay already centered. So getting started, when you start pulling a cylinder, you want your clay to, of course, be perfectly centered. And when you're throwing a cylinder, you want your clay to be skinnier, your centered clay that is, your centered clay thinner and skinnier rather than wider. If you're throwing a bowl, you usually want to have a wider piece of clay. If you're throwing a cylinder, you usually want it to be skinnier. Then, to get started with doing this, you're going to use your hands and brace your hands and just use one finger into the center. Now, some potters will use two thumbs, some will use two fingers. There's, an infinite ways to do that. But just for us to get started, I'd like you to start by using just one finger, and then you can kind of branch out after you've mastered that. You can kind of make up your own style. But what you're going to do is you're going to use your left hand to kind of hold the clay here just to brace yourself. I like to put my pinky down on the wheel head, then kind of lock my thumbs together and use these fingers on the other side of the clay, and then gently press my index finger down. Now notice I'm not sticking it straight down. Okay, I'm kind of angling it and using pressure on the tip of my finger and creating a kind of a V shape here. Okay, then I'm going to press down just a little bit harder. And as I go, I'm not going to press all the way down all in one go. I'm going to, use just a little bit of pressure and maybe do three pressures in. Okay, now when you get down to the bottom, you don't want to go all the way to the bottom. You want to leave about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom for making the base of the piece. Now, you'll notice I've got this little lip here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my index finger and thumb and kind of hold the clay here and just compress that lip back in so it's one nice solid piece. You always want to compress your lip or the rim when you're doing a cylinder so that it doesn't get out of control, because it can easily get out of control. Now I've got the hole placed in. One thing I like to do is you can take your pin tool and stick it right into the middle and use your finger and say, okay, it was about here. That's about how deep my clay is. Okay, it's a little bit too deep. Okay, so I could push down a little bit more and open it just a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to open that a little bit more and pull up. Okay, now I've got it about right. And what I want to do is I want to now pull the clay out towards me. Okay, I'm going to do it nice and slow. I'm just going to use that one finger and I'm just going to gently pull towards me nice and slowly. Don't go too fast. Okay. And you'll see that again I've got this little rim right here. I'm going to compress that rim so that it doesn't get out of control later. Okay, and you can see on the inside I've got the beginnings of the base opening. Okay, I'm going to do it one more time, and I'm using just my index finger. It looks like I've got my other hand in, but I'm really holding my hand like this and just using the tip of my index finger, and I'm bracing my index finger with my other three fingers. Okay, now we've pulled this 3 times. I'm going to compress this rim again so that it doesn't get out of control on me. And now we've been pulling the clay apart in the center like this, and those platelets inside are pulling apart. So we want to kind of squish them back together so that they don't start to have what's called an S crack. That's where the bottom of your pot cracks. So I'm going to start at the edge of my clay here, and I'm going to pull my finger along the center of the base in towards the center. I'm going to do that 3 times. Okay, so that's once. Here's twice. And here's a 3rd time. So I'm compressing the center and realigning the platelets back into the center. Now I've got my base finished, I've got my walls here, and I'm going to start pulling the walls up. Now before I pull the walls up, I'm going to just, again, compress that rim. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to use my fingers here and press underneath, and my middle finger on the inside to make kind of a gap like this, and then I'm going to pull up. Some potters use their knuckles, some potters like to use a sponge. It's all what's comfortable for you, and you kind of got to find your own voice in that. But here we go. I'm going to get started. I'm going to undercut this with my finger and press in, and at the same time I'm pressing out with my left hand and creating a divot on the inside. Then I'm just going to pull up gently into a little mound like that. Okay, now before I go too far again, I'm going to compress my rim, make sure it doesn't get out of control. Get my clay wet again and go back for my next pass. I'm just going to use my thumb and get the clay out from underneath there. And I'm going to, again, undercut and press in with my right hand and out with my left hand and make the little like line of clay. And now I'm going to start pulling that up. And you want to go nice and slow. Just got a little lump of clay off. You want to go nice and slow so that it doesn't get out of control on you. And you want to pinch the clay evenly as you go up so you don't end up getting inconsistencies in your clay. Now you can see my rim is kind of wiggly, so I'm going to compress that rim again. I got a little lump of clay on there. And in the video, you can probably see that my clay is starting to flare out a bit. So I'm going to teach you a little move here called collaring. What you're going to do is you're going to make the A-OK sign with both your hands, and you're going to use the tips of your middle fingers, the tip of your knuckle, and your thumb, and you're going to pinch the clay in slowly like that, so that you get more of a cone shape rather than a flaring out shape. Okay? Now, I want to keep pulling, and you'll notice that the assignment is to make a 6-inch cylinder. So what you're going to do is you're going to keep working on this until you can get it. I'm sorry, I said 6-inch. I meant 5-inch. A 5-inch cylinder. So you're going to keep working until you can get it up to 5 inches. Now my clay is pretty thick at the bottom, but I think I've already surpassed my 5 inches. But I'm going to keep doing this just to show you how far we can get it up. Going to compress this edge again, just so it doesn't get out of control. Going to undercut with my thumb just a bit. Okay, now I'm back to pulling again. Notice I took my sponge to add some water, and here we go again. We're going to just push in at the bottom and pinch that clay up. Notice right here, I'm going to take my hands away. You can notice this little ridge right here. That's where my finger is on the inside, and I've got this lump of clay here that I'm actually taking from the bottom of the clay and moving all the way up. That's the bit, is you're taking the clay from the bottom and you're moving it up through the wall all the way up to the rim. Now, we've done about 3 pulls. I can't remember now if we've done 3 or 4, but we've done about 3 pulls, 3 to 4 pulls. And after you've done that many pulls, again, we're separating that clay out like this as we're pulling it up. And so you want to compress the clay back down every so often. So what I'm going to do, make sure my hand is wet as I go inside here, and I'm going to take my rib and I'm actually going to pull just a little bit of clay back down and compress those little clay platelets back into place. And this is again going to help cracking. Long term, you don't want to have any cracks in your clay, and so the more you compress the clay often, the less cracking you'll have. Okay, so that's our cylinder. It should be pretty even all the way up. You should have a nice rim that's been compressed, and it should be at least 5 inches. Okay, I don't have my ruler right now, but this one is probably going on 7 or 8 inches at the moment. Okay, once you're done with your cylinder, you're going to call me over. I'll put it in the grade book. We'll make sure that it meets all the requirements. One thing that you're going to want to do, make sure, is take your sponge and get on the inside and get any water out of your cylinder. If you have any water that's left in there, it kind of soaks the clay into mush, and then you have more S-cracks. So you really want to make sure to get any moisture out of the bottom. Okay, then finishing off, this is called an undercut tool. You angle it kind of on a 45-degree angle towards you, touch it to the wheel head and slide it in. And you'll just see that kind of clay come out like that. And now we've got an undercut right here underneath. One thing that'll do for you is it'll kind of make your piece look a little lighter because it's got some air underneath it, and it's going to make it easier to get off the wheel. Okay, to get your clay off the wheel, you just grab a little bit of water, put it on the one side, then dry your hands. They should be really nice and clean and dry. Okay, all too often kids try to pick up their clay with wet hands, and then the pot just slides right out of your hands. So you get your hands nice and clean and dry. Then you're going to use your wire tool, and you want to take your fingers and firmly place them on the wheel head, and then pull the water underneath your pot. Okay. Get your hands dry again because they might have gotten a little wet. Then I like to take my fingers like this, kind of like Dr. Spock, and lift my clay off the wheel like that. And then you're going to go put it onto either a bat or a board somewhere. Now, this particular cylinder, I'm setting it back down because I want to do the final bit of the demonstration here. This cylinder is pretty big at the bottom because I used 2 pounds of clay. You really only need 1 pound of clay in order to make a nice 6-inch or 5-inch cylinder. All right, but this one is going to be nice and thick and heavy and paperweight style on the bottom, which we don't want. Okay, so as I pull this away, you can see right down here, this is a nice wall here, but here we've got a pretty thick piece of clay. This wall should really be like that. All this clay over here is extra that I could have pulled up in there. Also, this bottom is quite thick. All right, it could be more like, well, that's a little too thin. Could be more like that. Okay, unless you're going to be cutting a foot on it, then you want to leave a little extra so you can cut that foot out later. But this is about what you want as far as your height, and these walls right here are nice and even. This down here is still far too thick. But that's how you go about throwing your first cylinder. The cylinder is the basic shape for all of the other pottery that comes after it, anything that's vertical. And then we'll talk about throwing bowls, which are the open forms. Thanks for joining me.